Hi, everybody. My name is Cindy Mallory, and I'm going to be moderating a really fun conversation. We're talking about IRL, the human component of virtual reality onboarding, demonstrations, and training. The first question actually I should introduce people. I am the chapter president for the VRARA Association New York, and I also do emerging tech strategy for American Technology Services. Bobby?
Yeah, I'm Bobby Carlton, and I am the co-chair of the training committee for the VRARA, as well as I work for FS Studio as their XR VR content manager and business development, and I write for VR Scout.
Hi, I'm Fraser Bowie. I am a board member of the AR/VR Association in Orlando. I spent 11 years with Verizon, where I started kind of my AR/VR career or journey, but now Chief Product Officer with New Eyes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Stapp. I work in the Immersive Technology Lab at NYU, and we are part of the Center for Faculty Advancement in the Office of the Provost. And our main function is to onboard and train faculty and staff, and some students too, in immersive technology and bring them up to speed and what's available and how they can integrate immersive tech in their pedagogy or into the classroom or into the research and those kind of things.
All right, I'm super excited because we have people from such different walks of life who all engage with the technology where you put people inside these experiences. So one thing I'd like to explore first is, in what kind of scenarios have you had to onboard users to virtual reality? Bobby?
Oh, well, that's actually, interestingly enough, one of the scenarios has been just introducing them to just virtual reality. I've presented at our conferences where we have people from enterprise looking for solutions in how AR and VR could play a role in their industry, but a lot of the times these individuals really are just either hearing about virtual reality or they read about it or they see it on television. So for them, it's just an introduction of what does a headset look like? Will I get sick? How are my hands involved? And so that, to me, is always really sort of an interesting approach because, because you always expect hey, how do I use virtual reality to help, better with the onboarding? When they're really just asking, how do I use it? And I'm sure Fraser has probably seen a lot of that with his Verizon days.
Yeah, it's funny because when a new technology like this comes out, everyone wants to do it, but they really don't know what it's about. And so, I think the exciting thing is when you put somebody in a headset, no matter what their concept of VR was, it changes instantaneously because they can never imagine what it truly is until they put it on. So, from the executive, right, the CEO of Verizon down to the retail store employee, it's just amazing how different everyone reacts, but how excited they get when they get a chance to jump in.
And in academia, traditionally universities are kind of slow to adopt new technologies and kind of integrate them. And so we have a lot of first-time VR users, and a lot of people are a little standoffish at first. They see people kind of looking around, and it is a little intimidating. But like you said, once they put it on, people get it, and they're interested in it, and they want to use it. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that I did was a store robbery training, and I'll tell you, it was very intense, and there were people in the organization that did not want anyone to go through this, because they thought it was too intense, and when they started hearing everyone else's reaction, they craved it. They needed to get in it. They needed to get all their people in it. So again, I think it also depends on the experience. Sometimes there will be people that will be like, no, 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 no. But when they start understanding what other people are experiencing, they want it as much as anyone else.
Yeah, that's great. That kind of leads into my next question, which is, how is onboarding for a specific application different than general use? Can you share some examples?
You want to jump on that one there, Fraser? From my experiences, again, the different approach, whether it's recruitment, whether it's learning a new process, or even sort of an exit interview, how you use the technology does really change. Like, you can't just sort of have like a rinse and repeat type of approach with XR technology. It really, I know people seem to, you hear the term, you're like, oh, we build out an XR, it's rinse and repeat, we then launch the training, but that's actually not the case, because you have to think about the individuals who are using it. Like, first off, it's important to understand that XR technology, VR training, can alienate those legacy employees, right? You get those individuals who've been working in the industry for 20 years, and they're like, well, we've always trained in this manner of, like a textbook or a lecture, and now you're asking us to train in a completely different way. And then you can't just assume that young people are going to be experts in VR or AR technology. And so each approach is different. Each demographic is going to be different. And you have to also think about that some people just don't want to change. However, as an industry changes, as we become more digitally connected, those processes do evolve. And so you need to figure out what is the strategy of implementing that evolution of training or onboarding or just sort of passing on of knowledge within your workforce. And again, depending on the workforce, medical, real estate, first responders, it's going to be different.
And you bring up a good point around people afraid in the training space. So I don't know how many of you out there are trainers or content developers for traditional training, but there was a lot of, at Verizon, there was a lot of hesitation because, once you put that headset on, the facilitator doesn't know what's going on and that sort of stuff. So, realizing that this is an additional tool, right? It's never going to replace the classroom. It's never going to replace some of the stuff that you have to do, even hands-on training. It's never going to replace that, but this is an additional tool that allows you to understand that. So even when onboarding the training department and getting them to really understand it, it is more than just the actual technology. It's about how it gets used and the benefits around it, and not to worry about your job sort of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. In the classroom, and we kind of push the point out that it is not, you're not going to have 30 students in VR for an hour and a half. It's just not realistic. And really kind of hammering it home to the people who want to use it in their pedagogy. They really want to use it, except they don't really know how to use it. So that's one thing that we kind of teach, is kind of bring people up to speed on how they can use it efficiently and supplement their classroom.
I do think it's important to mention, though, that by bringing XR technology into your ecosystem, there's going to be disruption. And I think you need to absolutely factor in that idea that it's not just going to work. And that's where I think where sometimes bringing in XR technology for onboarding and training fails, because everyone just thinks it's going to work. And you need to have this approach. You cannot advocate for the technology. I think that's really important to mention. You need to be an expert in it. You need to understand it, but it means understanding where it works, but where it fails. And I think the value is knowing where it fails and how you can avoid those pitfalls when using it for onboarding new talent or recruiting for new talent. And I think there's some great examples of how companies, like Nissan, for example, did an amazing recruitment project using Star Wars Droid Builder virtual reality. They put this VR application in the floor room and just had people play games and build droids, and they just use it as an icebreaker to be like, hey, you're really good at building droids, can you fix cars? And it was just a way to start a conversation to find out who was a mechanic and who wasn't. And they actually found that approach saw applications go up, and they were having a bigger talent pool to choose from for finding new mechanics to bring into the workforce.
I know when it comes to having a classroom full of students all in virtual reality, Andrew is definitely used to that.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Have you found ways to improve the onboarding process?
One of the biggest things is being able to see what people are seeing in VR. That's called casting. And so there really isn't a good solution out there because traditionally the user has to enable the casting. They have to click a button, they have to open up a menu. It's this long process, and we teach new users, and just getting them to click the right buttons can sometimes be a challenge. So we developed our own casting solution where you can kind of, in a classroom with 30 students in VR, everyone is in their own little world, quite literally, and you can kind of just click and choose, headset number 15 is having an issue. You can kind of see what they're seeing, and they might be off way in the distance, and so you kind of have to guide them back because, again, it's a new technology, and there's a learning curve to it. So you kind of have to account for that in your presentation and demo of the hardware itself.
Yeah, and I used to say that the content is really important, but the logistics is even more important because that's where, even if you have fantastic content, if you don't have something like that, you can have a class walk away thinking that it's the worst thing they've ever done in training.
Oh yeah, and first impressions in the technology are super important.
Yeah.
It kind of, it sets, first impressions in general, are important, so.
Yeah, so speaking on onboarding and first impressions, has there ever been a time for any of you, Bobby, I'll go with you first, that onboarding did not go quite as expected?
Yes, actually, it actually went horribly wrong. We literally we put someone into a VR headset, and so this was a training that was designed for a company that they partnered with a much larger company to do this VR training on a big day of sales, without giving up too much information. But what happened was the company actually told employees, you have an option. You can use this training, or you can lean on the old way of training. And this company spent a lot of money on creating this virtual reality platform, and people were just like, I'm just gonna go back to the old way of training. And so the launch didn't work because they just gave their employees that option. They were like we have this new fancy training mechanism, and we want everybody to use it, but if you're a little hesitant, you can just use the old way. 98% of the people went the old way. No one wanted to embrace the new way, and so it cost the company a lot of money.
That's unfortunate. Andrew, you did mention that in academia, people are usually kind of laggards to technology, or it's new to them, especially virtual reality. Is there any time that training or onboarding has gone wrong for you?
Yes, definitely. There was this one instance that comes to mind that I think preparation is extremely important. And I was not prepared for this one. It was this special case where this faculty member, they didn't come to me, I went to them, and I was ill-prepared, and I did not have the right installations and configuration all set, and so they just wanted to see something. So I put them in this kind of Iron Man experience where they're flying around a city. And all of a sudden, at one point, the user is just kind of looking everywhere, and she's like, I'm spinning, I'm falling. And I had to be like, oh my, shut your eyes, please, shut your eyes. And she took off the headset and was kind of confused, and I put on the headset, and she's just spinning like crazy, falling out of the sky. And that was her first impression of VR. So I don't know if she's been back to use it again, but yeah, so preparation is definitely a key factor, and knowing your content and knowing your audience is super important.
Fraser, do you have anything to add? Yeah, I actually just recently did a demo for 4 people, 4 different headsets, and just not thinking about it, right? You're in it all the time, so you know how easy it is. And simple little things that I realized afterwards was they would step out of the boundary or something like this when they were putting it on, and I couldn't wrangle all 4 of them at the same time. So just saying, put a piece of tape on the floor, just stand on the tape, then put the headset in, and then go. Little things like that. You just from a logistics standpoint, thinking about it, certainly having the right content is key, but really just, you know, it's really easy one-on-one, right? Especially if they're sitting in a chair and you're putting them in a very simple, it's really easy. But when you start getting to that 30 people in a classroom, you've got to really have your ducks in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one part we're not even thinking about is sometimes you have to train people to learn how to use a controller, and that alone, you got them in a headset, and you're like, push the home button, and they're like, their thumbs just mashing every button possible, and of course, and if you don't have a system, that Andrew has where you can see what they're seeing through casting, they're back in. They're like, I see a menu, and you're like, oh, okay, so you're back at the menu, and you're taking heads. That's 5 minutes. Right? Imagine putting 100 employees through that process, and each employee takes 5 minutes to learn how to use a controller. And now you have your chief learning officer saying, so what am I paying for? So, because they're looking at the overall time and commitment and the money involved with each employee, each of those 5 minutes. Now imagine that across the world with every employee.
And you remind me of something. So when I first did the store robbery training, we were using the Oculus Go. So the ergonomics of the headset is just as important because people would put it on and do this, and the power button was right where their finger was. And so you ran around the classroom clicking the power button back on for everyone.
Oh, so we've covered some horror stories with training, but obviously we are all advocates of the technology and we want to see it grow and adoption grow. So when it comes to investing, what are some questions to ask before investing in training VR?
At least from my perspective, like some of the questions before investing is I think you need to internally get your stakeholders involved. You need to internally get your management team involved, and you need to know, you need to go to your HR and see what is, how, is this training going to be compliant? Is this going to impact, the required training that you need, that all employees will need? So, we'll just talk about sexual harassment training. Is the VR training that you're delivering, is that going to be enough information and required information for you to be certified for that year? And so those are the questions you need to ask. There's a lot of technical questions, but I still think as a company or as an industry, when adopting XR into your ecosystem, you just have to make sure that, at least from my perspective, that everyone involved is on board, and you have to ask those questions.
Yeah, when we did the store robbery training, it was holding people up at gunpoint, right? So HR was not a fan of us doing it, but we were in the training department. We were a part of HR, so we could push the boundaries a little bit. But the success of that training was the content, and that was because retail was involved, HR was involved, security was involved. When we had some of the top security guys in the company on the shoot when we were shooting it. We had them giving input, we had HR giving input. Quite frankly, we didn't listen to some of the HR input, and they were thankful of it. Like, they told us not to use 4-letter words, but we did, and it became much better. But things like that, but really getting as many people and picking the right content. I've seen a lot of content out there, or a lot of people ask about doing content that is, hey, so I train everyone in this room that has refrigerators, and I want to train them on how to turn them on. Can we do a VR? Well, aren't you in a room full of refrigerators? It's much easier just to flip the actual switch than it is to build something. So that's the other thing to be successful is look at what the content is.
Is it worth it? Yeah. I think that's 100%. Because VR is not, going to work for everything. It's not perfect for everything. It's great in a lot of ways, but to try and force something, is not necessarily the right way to go.
Yeah, and that's the idea, right? Having a good strategy, right? Really, again, if you are here as a learning leader, or if you're here as someone who's looking to bring that into your ecosystem, it's knowing the technology, having that strategy, working with somebody who really understands it and how they can blend that into your current LMS. Because again, it's not a like, we did it this way and we're no longer doing it this way. You need to figure out how do you roll that in, again, without alienation, without all that disruption, because you want the workforce to keep going, you want the learning to continue, but when you're bringing this in, you have to expect that sort of slow down, and you have to think about how do you integrate that into moving forward.
Thank you. Another question I have for you is, what sort of formats work best for training? Bobby, if you want to tackle that first.
The simpler the better. Fraser talked about Oculus Go. I still think the Oculus Go headset is a really great headset. It's a 3DoF headset, right? So versus having full 6DoF. The reason why 3DoF is great is because the learner has less to learn to access the learning mechanism, right? So you can just put them into something very basic. The content has to be, realistic, right? I think, Fraser talked about, 4-letter words. I mean, that has to be part of the training system. So I think simple is always the best way. Don't make it complicated. Don't have all this interactivity. You don't have to have 2 controllers. I mean, I can see why, the technology's changed and we can have it. But sometimes when a mass sort of rollout, I think, I still think 3DoF, Oculus Go type of approach really works.
Yeah, I was sad the day that Google announced cardboard was going to go away. But it's true. And, you can create an environment that looks unbelievably realistic, and that's great. But the level of effort for that is huge compared to what your return on investment is going to be. So don't think it always has to be this AAA video game or that sort of thing. And the idea of doing 360 video is really I think it's not there yet, but I think it's going to get to a point, much like when in training we started doing our own videos, right? We started doing video training, and you'd hire these big video crews. Now you're doing it on your iPhone. I think you're going to get there with 360 video, but 360 video can be really impactful as well. And it's just, I agree with Bobby, as simple as possible for, you don't want to spend that 30 minutes training them how to do the training.
And also, people are not going to be in the headset for that long. I think 10 to 15 minutes seems to be like the sweet spot. That's what I found in the classroom, at least. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Andrew, can you talk about a time that data insights or user feedback changed the course of development?
Sure. Yeah. Before I was at NYU, I had an immersive art exhibit. And one of our seasons was called Sweet Paradise, and it was very fantastical, very fantasy-esque. And I started developing a VR unicorn ride. And I built the controller to be a hobby horse, if you remember the horse heads on sticks. Mm-hmm. And so I had this thing in my head that's going to look great, but the first person to use it was on our opening night, and the person just started going and riding the hobby horse, and it just looked like the most ridiculous thing of all time. And so getting prototypes into people's hands as quick as possible and really getting the user feedback is extremely important. Because, from the development side, you might have this whole plan and want people to use things in a certain way, but inevitably you want them to look this way, inevitably people are going to be facing this way, and you have to tell them, oh, look around, push the red button, and they're like, what red button? I don't see a red button. So it goes back to logistics questions, and the logistical problems. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or anything, but.
Well, and you mentioned looking around, so when I talk about VR, I used to have, especially if everyone's sitting in a swivel chair, I'd say, okay, so everyone do a 360 because this is what it's about. So the store robbery training that we did, there was the way it started was you were acting as the store manager, so you're in front of the door going to unlock it, and someone runs up behind you and starts yelling, screaming, and swearing at you, and if you turn around, there was a gun 6 inches from your face. So if you saw the CBS News story, you could see what we said to that guy as well, was we said, turn around. So, you know, the one thing I learned from that experience is spatial audio could be unbelievable. And so again, you know, we didn't have spatial audio, so you didn't hear these footsteps coming up behind you and all that. And we told everyone in the class, turn around. At the beginning, you should turn around. When you hear the guy start telling you not to turn around, you should turn around. So, you know, that was something that I missed.
Yes, great point. Spatial audio is, I think, a key factor in how a user experiences these type of training. And I think, and I'm probably going out on a limb and saying this, and I may regret it, but I do think moving forward, when we think about how your companies or how your industries are developing virtual reality training for onboarding and for recruitment, for example, and all this other aspects, the UX designer is going to be the rock stars of virtual reality
100%.
Development. That is, you know, I mean, at the time, back when you know, the coders and developers were the rock stars, we are now at a point where the technology is really there. It's the UX designer. They're the rock stars, so if your company doesn't have one, go find one, because they're the ones who are going to shape and reshape your training and onboarding. I may regret this comment, but I'm standing by it right now.
So you guys have worked on a plethora of different types of experiences. What are some of the things that you wanted the learners to actually learn? And were you able to teach it with virtual reality, Fraser?
Yeah, so I know I keep going back to the store robbery, but, you know.
It's a great experience.
It is a great experience. So we went out, we had no ROI, right? Because that would get a little dicey on what that ROI is. But the goal there was to get that heartbeat going so that we could have people make critical decisions in intense situations. That was the goal. From our feedback that we got, we think we achieved that goal. But it was not about saying, hey, we're going to have more sales. It wasn't about this, that, and the next thing. It was really getting them in a place where they could make those critical decisions, because what we were seeing in the few store robberies that happened, it was panic, fight or flight kicked in, and that's not what we wanted. So, you know, we think we certainly, the first thing we got back, the first verbal comment we got from somebody was, I now realize there's more than just me in this situation. Because we had this fantastic actress that was bawling the entire time. So this was a store manager that realized, wait a minute, if this happens, I've got to think about everybody. It's not just about me running out the door, you know, sort of thing. So it really did, our goal was achieved with that comment alone.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I agree.
I'll make this really quick. I will say, one thing that was really achieved on a project that I had worked on, we did a bank robbery type of experience where we actually built the bank in like a digital version, a digital twin of this bank. And we noticed something during the robbery, and every new employee who weren't familiar with how the bank layout was, always stalled by like 2 or 3 seconds when they were looking for the exit. So the objective was get to the exit. And they would stall 2 or 3 seconds. And of course, you know, if there's a gun situation, 2 or 3 seconds could mean life or death. And what the bank found was the exit to get out of the building was next to a painting that looked like the exit. So people stalled by 3 seconds to figure out which door do I go to. And so the bank took that data and they moved the painting. And every training after that, we eliminated that 2 to 3 second stall.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Fun, we have 30 seconds left, so I quickly want to get, what is the first thing you remember demoing to somebody? Think back. Andrew.
Well, again, it goes into something that I've built. I guess the first thing that really made an impact was, again, that my unicorn ride. It's hard not to go back to that. But again, it made me realize that when people are in VR, they almost, when they're doing it, people on the outside watching, it almost becomes a show in itself. I had never thought of that before, but like people watching someone in VR, it almost becomes like an interactive experience in itself. I never thought about that before, but yeah, the unicorn ride, people dancing, riding on a unicorn, that kind of sticks out in my mind.
Perfect. All right, thank you guys so much for joining us for this conversation today. I had a really great time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.